Good evening, friends. Welcome to this edition of Mystery Wine Blind Tasting here at Field and Main. We have a beautiful red to work together this evening on what is a perfect night. I was just talking with some guests out on the patio, and I hope some of you might be there too. If so, let me know. Chime in. Tell me if you're along for the ride this evening and where you are. And we'll get to going with this particular wine. It's got a particular nose, which we'll have to work on. It's sharing something right off the bat. So for those of you that are new to this and just joining us for the first time, welcome. We're excited to have you with us. This is a series of monthly blind tastings. So we get this bottle in a paper bag, sold here at the restaurant, and we now have months available all the way through October. So some people make their way here and buy the next several months at a time. So you could buy July, August, September, and October, a little 4-pack. And then we meet on the third Thursday at 7 o'clock to have a tasting together and to learn what we can about what's in this particular bottle without looking at it, without knowing anything about it other than what's in our glass. And then we would do the grand reveal about a half an hour later, after having worked our way through first the visual assessment, then the smell assessment, and then finally a taste assessment, and put together a profile of this wine. So the Pennsylvania gang is here. Hello, Sarah and crew. Great to have you with us. They're a great example, right? They come down from Pennsylvania and they buy up what they can of what we have available for our mystery wines, and then they play along from Pennsylvania. So delighted you're here with us, as I am to see Rob and Kathy. Hi guys, great to have you with us this evening. This is it's explosive. It's got real reddish fruit character that's just coming right out of the glass. So we'll get to that in a minute, but as we've talked about many times in the past, sometimes there's part of the wine that just grabs you, comes right out of the glass and just tells you something, and you have to pay attention to that. We work a process, and that process you shouldn't eschew because you've had an impression of the wine. Equally though, you want to make sure that you take that impression and you plug that back into the process, and so we'll do that tonight too. But Veronica and Dan are here, and Dean and Bobbin are as well. Hey everybody, super excited to have all of you here. Thank you for joining. So for me, the thing that I can't avoid right off the bat is this sort of reddish fruit that's tiny bit medicinal, and you just make a note of it. Like I said before many times, we don't want to rush to judgment and say, gosh, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc's a great example where I got this grassy note and some lime note and some grapefruit. It's New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And it probably is. That if that jumps right out of the glass and you're latching onto that and it's evoking a taste memory, that's wonderful. But flag that and say, all right, I'm going to work the process and see if the process takes me to that conclusion or if it takes me somewhere totally different. It's good to have your first thought. So for me, there's just this reddish fruit character. So I'm getting ahead of myself by way of the nose because it tapped me on the nose and said, pay attention. But let's do what we do all the time and do a visual check of this wine first. And so what we're looking for is color and what kind of color it is, and that tells us a whole bunch about the wine right off the bat. Give it a swirl, and as you swirl it, make note of the rim that creates where the top part of the swirl goes, and then does the wine come down in the form of tears, and do they form legs that stand and hold for a period of time or not? And in my case here, there's not a lot of evidence of tears or legs. This sheets down pretty quickly. The color is what? What kind of color do you see? How would you describe the color? And we're looking for things like, is it reddish? Is it purplish? Does it have a little bit of brownish cast to it, kind of a tawny cast? So is it brickish, tawny, rubied, purple? Where does it sit on that spectrum? It's red, so it's a red grape, which is wonderful, right? So we can already rule out white grapes. And we're that much closer to understanding what this wine might be. We can eliminate half the world of grapes. It's not rosé. It does have a lightish cast to it. Sarah, yeah, it smells Bordeaux-y. Bordeaux-y is a fun word. to say. Yeah, it has a red currant quality, and you can pick that and sometimes up in Bordeaux. It's brighter than that on the nose than typical Bordeaux for me. That's why I'm not sure I'm headed there. But this is exactly right. If it smells Bordeaux-y for you, you make a flag note for yourself. Put a pin in the idea that this is Bordeaux. And when we get to that point, you should be evaluating along the way. Is it Bordeaux? Yeah, Dean's playing the bottle game and not the wine game, or Bobbin is, and it's not a Bordeaux bottle, and so yes, it takes you away from that. And let's talk about that when we get to that point too, where let's talk about that Bordeaux-y versus not Bordeaux, perhaps in just the context of the color. Would we see this color in Bordeaux, and in particular the intensity of the color? And so when I say that, I'm talking about the color itself, like you'd see on a painting, but then also how deep is the color? Is it opaque and hard to see through? Is it lighter and more vibrant? Could you read a paper through it? So it's not the most intense color here, so it's a little bit lighter. And I think in that sort of reddish, there's almost a little bit of a browning quality on the edge. There's like a little rim variation there, maybe not a ton. So when you're looking at the wine kind of from the top, and if you have something sort of light or white underneath it, that'd be great. That little variation and the outside rim of the glass, where the wine is the furthest, you might see a little change from the outside rim as you go into the middle. And as it changes more and more, as it ages more and more, a lot of wines will show kind of a browning color there, or just a lighter version of the color relative to what it is in the core where you have more wine. And so that's the case. You also want to look at that rim and look and see, is there a watery quality to the outside? Is there what's called a meniscus, right? A thin layer around the outside. That watery meniscus is often an indication of a little bit more alcohol. The swirl test would also indicate alcohol or potential residual sugar in a wine, showing you legs and then the formation of those legs into tears. This doesn't have that. So my impression of this wine thus far, just by looking at it, is that it's a reddish, lighter reddish grape. It's not super intense in color. I can make out my hand through it. I could make out words through it. And it has a little bit of a color variation, and not the biggest watery rim, but it has a little bit. So a thinner rim, yeah, Kathy, I agree. It's a little bit lighter. And so in that context, I think we're talking about, relatively speaking, a thinner skinned grape. And we're talking about maybe a cooler climate, because it's not the richest, most robust profile by way of the swirl test. It has a little bit of a rim on the outside, so maybe it has a little higher alcohol, but not persistently so, at least in terms of how it sets in the glass. So from that standpoint, we're looking at a wine that maybe would be more like 12.5, 13.5 tops % alcohol. Could be a little lighter, 12 to sort of 13%. I don't know, but that's all visual, and we'll work on that when we get again to the palate and taste it. But let's smell it and see what we learned about it from smelling it. As I said, it was kind of pumping out to me like strawberry fruit roll-ups. It was showing a real fruited characteristic, of kind of a medicinal sort of cough drop, cherry, like Luden's cherry cough drop quality to it for me. Robert, yes, I'm getting that little alcohol burn too. Cooked fruit for you, yes. Yeah, so for me, that was like the dried, cooked quality of fruit, a touch of vanilla. So off of Robert's notes, the alcohol burn could be a little bit higher alcohol. We're not necessarily seeing that in the body, but it could have a little bit higher alcohol. It has a fruit profile, and he's talking about fruit and the condition of the fruit. So what kind of fruit are you smelling? Like for myself, for example, cherry, strawberry, but then Robert gave it the modifier of cooked and expressed sort of where you might find cooked fruit as opposed to, say, fresh fruit. When I said earlier too that my initial thought about it based on the color might be something cool climate oriented, you'd be more hard pressed to find a cool climate production that has a cooked fruit profile. It would come somewhere from something that's a bit warmer, or in a warmer climate traditionally. So a riper situation. Now you could be in a cool climate and have a ripe vintage, a ripe aspect, so full sun kind of exposure. But shorter growing season because it's cooler climate and thus not quite the same intensity. But this is a wine that's presenting some enigmas, right? So you get a little watery rim, you get an alcohol burn on the nose, but you don't see it in the form of tears or legs. And so we're going to have to parse that out. But it's oftentimes more helpful than not because it's not, ubiquitous. It has distinctive calling card notes that we can begin playing with when we get down to trying to determine or at least make an evaluation of what this wine might be. For me, it's just really that kind of candied cooked and sugared fruit. A touch of an herbal note, but not much. And Dean, I guess you're picking up the same thing, or Bobbin too. Mostly fruit, him something vegetal. That's great. That helps. All right. We're always, as I said before too, many times we're always looking for a few things: fruit, earth, and wood. So we've got fruit kind of nailed down. Earth, maybe some of that medicinal element, maybe not. There's not a lot of it there. And Robert noted vanilla. Vanilla is an indication perhaps that there's some oak here. And so maybe. Let's taste it and see if we can verify the fruit that we're smelling, the alcohol that we're perceiving, and a little bit of that vanilla note if there's a kind of a wood quality to this. Wow. There's a lot going on. So kind of restraining myself from talking just about the fruit and the experience of the palate, looking for the tastes before we get to the flavors. Is this a light, medium, or robust wine? Where's the acidity at? What's the tannin like? How is the finish here? All these things help to kind of create that structure of your profile. And so what are you picking up? I like the sound effects, Kathy. Thank you. Pew, 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 pew. It's just like, it was expressive in the nose. It's expressive in the palate. This is a wine that it's not shy. Like, this is not a wine that you just sort of have in the background and drink along with whatever's going on there. It wants to be somewhat of the center of attention. And yes, Robert, it causes for you to pucker up a bit, for sure. So the acidity's high or medium plus, right? It's up there. The tannin is present. Ooh. It's not huge. Tannin's not big, but it's there. It's there in a way that's like a thin sheet under everything, right? It's there. It's not weighty. It's a little bit dry, but it also maintains, because of the acid, you still keep salivating. So skim milk consistency, Veronica, yes, thank you for that. The body is on the lighter side. So lighter with minimal tannin, and it's got a lot of acid. So, how about the fruit then? Let's go to the fruit. Fruit, earth, and wood. Kind of tastes like Sangiovese. Cool, Sarah. That's good. That's a very good note. So Sangiovese's on the list. We have a Bordeaux-y call from before. We'll at least put a pin in that too. But on the fruit side, yeah, that cooked fruit element's still there. Whew. How about that acid? So lighter, because the tannin seems to be building, maybe it's just sort of layering on top of the tannin that was in my mouth for the first sip and the second sip. It's going from light bodied, the sort of skim milk, into sort of 2%. It's getting a little more texture. Perhaps it's opening up too. I just opened it right before I clicked go live. So it's got a little bit of texture. It's got this pretty red color. How about the alcohol? Is there still a burn? Do you feel a burn? So a lot of times you can perceive alcohol toward the back of your throat post the sip. And that post kind of retronasal experience can be a little warm, can be hot. If you think about taking a shot of vodka or taking a shot of bourbon or something of that sort, a higher alcohol spirit that gives you a little bit of that burn. I don't pick up a lot of that here. Like it's not as much, but there is some. My initial thoughts were heading towards something like Gamma A, where we'd get some of that strawberry fruity kind of note, a real light body, and not a lot of texture. But then as we smelled the wine and built kind of that alcoholic element, as it showed a little bit of that watery rim in the meniscus, as it's giving us that sort of stewed fruit, and now a little bit of tannin, but not a ton of alcohol. I don't know. I think I've moved myself away from, say, Gamma or something light like that, and into something potentially Italian, like Sangiovese, that high acid there. Maybe Barbera, maybe Carignan or Sanso, kind of from Spain or from southern France. So a couple of options there. Curtis asking about Nebbiolo. Yeah, we should absolutely consider Nebbiolo. It has some of that fine tannin. It has a lighter body, but definitely more lighter appearance, but more structure on the palate, and the tannins are there. It could be, it could be Nebbiolo, right? Sure. Dean, I take your point fully, and you prompt my question then for the rest of everybody: Old World versus New World. And one of the kind of things that we would see in an Old World wine versus a New World wine is this sort of acidity. Not that a New World wine wouldn't have acidity, because it absolutely does, but that opulence of fruit, more of a fresh fruit, generally speaking. Sometimes it ventures into raisiny fruit, but fresher fruit, ripe, jammy fruit, potentially. But then with the acidity too, almost always takes you back toward the Old World. Sarah, your mom saying Petite Syrah? Yeah. Okay, Petite Syrah, I think a little bit more blue fruit, a little bit darker color, a little bit more intense body, but you could have a lighter variation on that. Could we talk about Syrah too? Should we put Syrah in there? So Nebbiolo, Barbera, so kind of northwestern Italy. I don't think this is Dolcetto. I don't think this is enough kind of darkish fruit and tannin, but I could be wrong. Sometimes after we say something too, it takes you a place, right? It creates a channel that you have to just venture down. And as we're talking about Italian wine, it just sort of seems like it smells more and more like an Italian wine. But the fruit's developing more, right? Is that the case for you too? I'm swirling, it's open, it's 15, 18 minutes, 17 minutes into its life being opened, and it's developing a little bit more pruny kind of notes. It's that cooked fruit is real prominent, but there's getting to be nuances of raisins and dried fruit character. We're heading to Italy, for example. We could go to the other side of Italy from the Piedmont, and something like Ripasso from Valpolicella. So you'd have the Amarone kind of raisiny skins that are then soaked with Valpolicella. So a Corvina blend. You can get some higher acid there. Not usually, I don't think is this high, but you can get some tannin, get some ripeness. So maybe in the Ripasso kind of world of Italy. Sarah's noting a tart finish too of Malbec. That's cool. So if we're going to shift gears, I'm assuming as you say that too, you're thinking about Argentina, but if you're not, let me know. And that would put a counterpoint to the discussion with relative to the Old World and the New World. If it's Malbec, it's going to be Malbec with quite a bit of acid, which is pretty interesting. So maybe a higher elevation Malbec from the high plains in Mendoza. I mean, the Mendoza is a high plain, but then in the more hillsides. an expression of Malbec that way. And Dean's kind of rounding out the profile with discussion about the length of the wine. The length of the wine, you would perceive that at the very end after a sip, or if you're spitting after that, and how long it lingers on the palate. And not lingers with the acid, it lingers with flavor. So if you got alcohol, weight, kind of a burn, or if you have the acidity that's making you salivate, that's not necessarily the finish. That's sort of part of the complete experience of the wine. But the finish, how long after you've either spit or swallowed the wine, does it continue to linger on your palate? 5 seconds or less, 10 seconds or less, you're talking about a short finish, sort of up to 20 seconds or so, it's a moderate finish. And then if it's 20 seconds or longer, you're talking about a long finishing wine. And a lot of this wine's experience is that acid. Sort of the fruit kind of stops, the tannin continues a little bit more, and then you've got the acidity, which just kind of keeps going, and the tannin like says, nope, I can come back. And so yes, I agree. Maybe I attribute that a little bit to youth. It does seem like it might open up a bit more with some time. There also seems to be those kind of distinct experiences within the wine. There's the tannic experience, the acidity experience, the fruit experience. They're not quite yet fully knit, and that's oftentimes an indication of age, as in youth. Kathy and Robert are noting that the wine really does change, and it's changing a bunch. I love how that happens, and we're now certainly at the point where wines definitely have changed for us historically at 22 minutes in, 24 minutes in. Sometimes wines just need a moment, and it does help. It helps to have other things to enjoy them with too, with food and company, and so that they can evolve a minute while they're open. As we're tasting wines for the restaurant and vendors are bringing them to us, our distributors, they'll make a note for us, like this wine was opened earlier today, this wine was opened yesterday, and you can evaluate a wine a lot based on how it holds up doing that. And there's a great deal of enjoyment to be found in a wine that certainly has been open for a minute and continues to evolve. And that's part of the pleasure of having a bottle of wine at a restaurant as opposed to a glass. Because the glass might already have been opened long enough to be at its kind of peak point or interesting point, or an interesting point, but the bottle, you get to watch that evolution. We're big fans here of opening, so say someone starts with a glass of wine or a cocktail. I love getting a bottle of wine open and pouring it, even though they might have something else going on. They can smell it, they can let it change a little bit, and they can begin to track its progress. Whereas if you get a bottle and you want to hold it, it's certainly something to do. But if you open it right before, say, your entree and it hasn't had a time to evolve, then it might be out of sync with the meal, and it gets really interesting after you finish eating. And so there can be worse things in the world, but yeah, that's part of the experience and part of the joy of having a wine like this begin to show itself 20 minutes into the experience. Yeah, it's starting to, like, there's a little brown sugary note. There's like a caramely toast note that's happening there. And maybe that's an indication of some of that wood that we might have picked up before in the way of the vanilla. There's like a root beer. It's kind of pulling that caramel woody note and that vanilla and mixing them together with some of that medicinal element. Those Brock's candy, like when I was a kid, little root beer barrel candies. That's sort of jumping out for me right now. I love those. They ripped up the roof of my mouth because I would suck on them so hard, but I love that smell, and so it's transporting me right back to sitting in the back seat of the car, a road trip, and trying my hardest to not crunch each and every one of those and bite into them. I never succeeded. I always bit down. Okay, so profile, right? From the beginning, It's lighter in appearance, reddish. It's got a kind of light, slight tinge of brownish color to the rim. It has a little bit of a watery meniscus. It has reddish character. No real legs or tears to talk about, but yet it has an alcoholic kind of aroma. It has a bit of that on the nose, not a huge amount of that on the palate. It's got a light to medium body, a skim milk to 2% kind of weight, and then it has a lot of fruit expression, mostly on the cooked side of things. So, Kathy and Robert, yes, there's a root beer barrel candy called, it's made by Brock's, right? But the barrel, I think, would be what is giving this wine that flavor profile, in concert with the fruit character. And so, yes, so kind of, I don't perceive an overt, like real new oak profile, but some oak element here maybe. Chris, you don't have the wine, but I will take the moral support and a guess, always. Welcome. So, and that sort of herbal element was a faint hint in the beginning, is coming out a bit more than for me now. We talked a little bit about the fact that this has sort of stewed, really ripe, sort of candied fruit as opposed to fresh fruit. And it has real high acid, medium plus to high acid, with a moderate level of tannin. Dan, you and I are in good company then. I love those candies. I have to go find those again. So, old world versus new world, as we start to kind of dwindle our way down, chip our way at this wine and kind of come to an initial conclusion and then a final one. The Malbec call, I think we might see some more plushness, not quite the same acidity, maybe a little bit more of a blue floral note, not necessarily here. So, and we haven't had any other real calls for anything necessarily from the new world. On the old world side, we talked about Bordeaux and Bordeaux-y right off the bat. Gamay was something I threw out there, and I don't think that's where we're at. Heading further south, we were thinking about sort of Carignan and Senso. I threw that out there. Heading to Italy to play with something like Nebbiolo, maybe Barbera, the far side of Italy from that area, from the Piedmont, up into the Veneto, and maybe talking about a Ripasso style. Sangiovese was thrown out early on. So sometimes if you look at the wine through it this way, and as it casts its shadow and the light reflects through the wine, you can see, does it give you a reddish character through the wine or an orangish character through the wine as it paints the surface underneath you. And that if it does orange, that's sometimes a tell for Sangiovese. It's more reddish on my side. Sarah, stick to the guns. Stick to your Argentinian Malbec. You know I've been wrong more times than I've been right, and so if you've got a sense of things and you can make your case, you stick there. I'm going to venture with Kathy and go Old World. There's a real ripeness that's in this fruit. Fruit and tannin and acid. It's pretty. Yeah. And then we'll talk about real quick about age, right? So that slight variation there might indicate a little bit of age, but those kind of distinct parts of the experience expressed in a different way that maybe would indicate something less than an aged wine, and so more on the youthful side, 18, 19, so it's going to have 2 to 4 years of age perhaps, and I think maybe more along the lines of that 4 years, and so a 19. Robert, you're saying 18-ish, that's perfect. Chris, we kind of ruled Beaujolais out. It's got tannin. It's got tannin in a pretty structured way. It has the fruit quality that definitely evoked a thought for Beaujolais, and I think it has a little bit more acidity than Beaujolais. I'd be surprised in a wonderful way in terms of the structure if this was Beaujolais. That's right, Kathy. That's 100% true. all participants get the trophy of a glass of wine in this game. So even when you guess wrong, you win. Yeah, I think I don't know. I think I'm stuck on the Valpolicella kind of side of things. Corvina, grape, Ripasso giving us some of that kind of fruit character. I don't know if it's enough of a right call in terms of the acidity profile and whether or not we would see a little bit more structure there. But so Valpolicella Ripasso 2019, 2020, 2020, maybe 2019, 2019, 2020. Is I think where I'm going to go. Anybody else have a particular flag they'd like to plant before we review? Yeah. So Argentine Malbec, Sangiovese perhaps, for some. Oh man, do I want to change my mind? Tannin's a little bit drier than I would associate with Ripasso, but some of that raisiny element, I'm not sure how I walk away from that. Senso and Carignan, I thought about that sort of sinewy element. If it's that, I'll be kind of upset with myself for walking away from that side of things, but it tasted more, smelled more, presented more kind of Italian. So, all right, let's see. Shoot. It's Sangiovese. Dang it. I've tasted this wine. It's 21 as well. Well, it was Italian at the very least. This is a Toscana Sangiovese, so from Tuscany, but not necessarily, say, Chianti, for example. It's a little bit riper in terms of that fruit profile. Like the cherry comes out, but it comes out in that stewed kind of way, and that's just the virtue of this particular wine. How cool. And 21, I thought it was a little bit more advanced than that. So, Calasivetta, Sangiovese. Cool. It's a wine that presents a little bit richer. Oh, okay, got you. Morlino di Scansano. They make some wonderful wines. They make some lovely Chianti. So this is sort of their probably easygoing, just Sangiovese that you can drink. Chris, it is a lovely bottle. We do have a couple bottles here still. I think we have 4 or 5 left, maybe in-house. If you're interested, you're welcome to drop by and grab a bottle. Yeah, no, it's a tasty Sangiovese that has a bit more presentation than some of the lighter versions and not quite the same structure as you might find in sort of Brunello. I tasted a beautiful Brunello today. Like 10 times the price of this. However, beautiful. Yeah, very cool wine. A wine that has enough intrigue and, per our conversation about how it has different component parts, you could probably keep this wine for a little bit, a few years and come back to it and see how it has improved. And when you can do that with a wine that's at this price point, that's a special thing. It's got a very cool label with this owl. It's a nice wine. They make great wine. So what a pleasure it is to taste it with you. I don't think, to answer your question, Veronica, I wouldn't necessarily think of Sangiovese as this high in acid. It has an acidic profile that's medium plus medium for sure, but it definitely jumped out and it maintained and was persistent throughout. So no, I wouldn't say that it's like typically this high, but it can have acidity, and it should. Sangiovese will, but not like so prominent. But a fun one. Getting some black tea now. It keeps changing. Well, to those of you that have a little bit left in your glass and hopefully a little bit left in the bottle, I think you're in for a nice next half hour or so, as it will continue to change even more so. For the rest of you, you already drank the bottle and you're already off to a good start then. So I look forward to doing this again with you next month. And we'll do it again For those of you that are here, we'll be tasting some more wines relative to some cool California stuff next week with our wine tasting seminar and dinner, and putting one together in August as well as another one in September. So look out for those things. And if you're by and want to pick up some bottles for the next couple of months, we have those, as I mentioned. So happy drinking. Cheers. See you soon. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful summer evening.